one of the biggest problems is that our churches have become overly functional. We have really, I think in the mainline church, and I'm really speaking mainline church, we have lost the ability or lost the willingness to really ground our decision making and everything on what's God calling us to do. In our leadership in churches, we don't really ask that question. For example, if you just go to the way we vote on issues using Robert's rules, we vote on majority rules. So the question we ask when voting is, all in favor say aye, all opposed say no, rather than something like asking people to pray and saying, all who sense this may be God's will for us say aye, all who don't say no. And this trickles down to the rest of the church. I don't think that in our churches we're really teaching people how to listen for God in their regular lives. And so what happens is, it really, what it does in the mainline church is it makes us sort of secret deists, where we're putting God up in heaven and we're kind of putting ourselves down here and not really emphasizing the connection. It's just really grounding ourselves in what God's calling us to do. And the metaphor I often use is ministry in life is about achieving a balance, and what it's doing is it's putting God right at the fulcrum, allowing God to be our balancing point. The popular thing right now, other than mission, is vision. And I think an awful lot of churches spend a lot of time trying to cast their vision, but I think they do it without actually asking the question, what are we called to do? One of the things, and when I came to Calvin Church, we did that exact same thing. We set a vision for the church. And I think what happened down the road was I recognized that we need to move more towards asking what our calling is, and that as you follow your calling as a church, that begins to reveal the vision. That begins to reveal what it is that we're led to do. And I think this is biblical. I mean, if you look at, for example, what Jesus is doing, he never cast necessarily, well, at least as far as I can tell, didn't cast a vision statement. What he did do, he was constantly asking, where am I called? So, for example, after he gets baptized, he's led by the Holy Spirit out into the desert to struggle, to grapple, to pray, to be tempted. I don't know that that would appear on anybody's vision statement. We're called to go out into the desert and struggle and pray. But that's the following of the calling. And the calling led him to minister around Galilee. The calling led him to Jerusalem. The calling led him to the cross, and the calling led him to resurrection. And I think that's the model, is when you're really asking the question, what's our calling, it begins to lead you to an underlying vision that God has for us, rather than the ones that we manufacture for ourselves. It's actually led to a technique that we've developed at Calvin Church, something I call transformational task forces. What we do now, instead of necessarily doing, and we have had in the past, long-range planning committees and things like that, but when we're contemplating whether we're called to do something different, we create a particular task force. And it's usually multi-generational. It represents everybody in our church, and it will be anywhere from 8 to 15 people. And we've done this, I tried to count it up once, but about maybe 8, 9, 10 times over the past 16 years at Calvin Church. And what we do is I give them materials to read. We have them do exercises. We actually have them spend time in prayer and things like that. And we allow them 8, 9, 10 months to really begin to craft a vision. But the vision is rooted not only in their learning, but also in their praying. And then they're the ones who then present this to our councils or board, what we call our session, present it to there and help present it to the congregation. We've got one right now where we call the Future of Worship Task Force, where they've been spending the past 8 months not only reading about worship, but visiting all sorts of different churches around the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, everywhere from emergent churches to contemporary churches to traditional churches to Taizé services to everything. And they're the ones who are actually spending time asking the question, what's our calling for this church in terms of the future of our worship? And that's really rooted in, and it's not just sitting around and praying and whatever comes to my mind, but it's actually sitting down and over time, asking the question, what's our calling? What's our calling? Because we believe that leads to the vision. Okay, it's not what do you want for this church? It is what do you sense God is really calling for all of us? Not just for your generation, not just for your particular segment, but for all of us. And it's really amazing when you sit down and do that, to hear people kind of come off their positions to open up to other positions, and a real creativity comes out of it, and a vision comes out of it that is different from what would have just been achieved by a committee that's just sitting down and saying, let's create a vision statement.